Okay, thank you, George. I thought that was really. I'm going to have some correction in the technology here, am I?
All good. What I suggest is just because you're 15 minutes early, just hang fire, talk to each other for a little bit, just because then if people are wanting to come see the next presentation equally, so we just stay to time. Sorry.
No, that's that.
Thank you, George. Very interesting.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I think that was fascinating. And I think just in terms of kind of filling this next 10 minutes in terms of just understanding the sort of bigger picture, I think what we've been seeing over the last 2 days, really, and certainly through this session, is that our industry is going through a significant change, a significant transformation. It's becoming far more of a data and information-driven organization than it ever has done before. And it's sourcing data from so many different places now. It's not just about drawings or about contracts or about specifications. It's about GIS information. It's about point clouds. It's about sensors. It's about dynamic data. And I think that whole kind of concept of our industry, the AECO industry, just becoming more of a data-centric industry, and speaking to the problems that really matter, which are sort of sustainability, safety, compliance, risk, performance, is quite fascinating. And hearing, everybody's different perspectives on how you kind of manage that and how you introduce that and how process and people and change need to happen as we kind of increase the volume and mass of data that's required in order to deliver a great job is really fascinating. And I think it kind of represents for me a kind of a starting point in this new transformative industry that we're going to see. It really feels as if we're on the cusp of something quite exciting that we're going to see in the future. So we've got still a couple more minutes. It feels like it's very difficult to sort of, burn away minutes when you're up here holding a microphone, right? I think I started talking thinking, gosh, that should give me 2 or 3 minutes, and we're already sort of, just still 20 past, right? So I guess let's have, maybe have a little bit of a conversation, maybe just sort of chat generally, perhaps around this kind of concept of, is our industry becoming a more data-centric industry, and how do we deal with that? Are construction companies, are AECO businesses really fitted out and ready to be that kind of organization?
Okay, so Ivan McTaggart, East West Rail. I don't know, some of you might have had the disappointment of listening to me yesterday. I'm very sorry. I think, look, it's not just this industry. Yeah, like I say, I came from defence industry, 30 years in defence, and spent the last 3.5 years now in East West Rail. Digital transformations of some sort have been going on for at least 2 decades now. We used to call them model-based engineering, model-driven engineering. I've seen model-based systems engineering. Digital engineering is just the latest expression of this transformation that began probably with the advent of CAD, way back, 3 decades at least ago. It's an ongoing transformation of trying to constantly get better at the way we deliver engineering, and we deliver more increasingly complex systems, for me. And it's not going to change. We'll have the next iteration of it. Once we get to true interoperability, maybe one might see some plateauing, but I'm not convinced that we're going to get to real interoperability between all the various digital or applications that we got in the near term, because that takes a really special thing for the vendors to get around and be incentivized by.
Thank you. I'll take that around. There we go. Sandy.
Thank you. Sandeep Jain, enablement team. I sort of echo your sentiment here. I think the industry is definitely becoming more data-centric, and that's similar to other industries. My only concern is how the integration of this data and information happens through the project. So as an example, it's great to see, from Phil and from George, how real examples, how this was used and how they were transformative. A few years ago, the information and data were confined in silos on projects because there were a few dedicated teams that were data-centric. And there was always a problem of change management. How do you propagate that information through the project? And now, my concern is that now with the advent of AI and the technology moving, tenfold faster than before, is that leaving people behind? Are people on site? How is that getting integrated with their process? Are they feeling left out in some ways? So I think it's more that sentiment and more concerns around that. But maybe we can take that up in the Q&A session.
I think that's a great observation, and I'd encourage you, Sandeep, to maybe put that into the into the Slido for the questions, because it would be really good to have the opinion of a panel on that particular question. So please do that. Hi.
Hi, Barry Gleason, WSP. Just on where we're at, so I'm not sure we're data centric. I think we're data focused. We've got digital competence, and definitely in construction now, it's moved a long way from talk. We saw the old wedge earlier on, the BIM wedge. I love that wedge. Developed in a bar with two people over a couple of minutes. But I think we don't want to overplay it, because the risk is we'll be a bit complacent. So I don't think we're data centric. I think we're data interested, and we're digitally getting more competent. And I think the challenge is still on the client side. So I think, in other industries, Jack showed at the start, way ahead with use cases. In my industry, we're still at kind of the construction phase and trying to tell the client this might be useful in operations, but we're not reaching there yet. So I'll go with the Jim Collins good to great model. Brutal honesty is where we start, and then we can move on from there. And I'd like more brutal honesty, to be honest. I mean, on George's presentation, that slide he showed with the view of the goggles, right? I can see all my executives looking at the goggles, right? I can't see him looking at the business model that leads to why you would use those goggles, right? There's really a massive leap from that wedge. If you turn that in its head, that's where we should be right now, looking at the business model, driving out the solutions. But their interest is numbers and gimmicks, right? Apologies to all my colleagues, but yeah, that's my brutal assessment.
And I think we all welcome, every opinion on this. And I think, sometimes we can get carried away with the technology without looking at the sort of the final destination, the end game, and why, asking our questions about why are we doing this and what does it really mean in terms of delivering value. Just another point, because we've just got a few more minutes. Because I think within Laing O'Rourke's scenario, and I think generally within the industry, we've seen this kind of slow shift towards a more off-site manufacturing approach. It's kind of interesting, if you look at kind of, core manufacturing, maybe automotive particularly, and automotive I think is a good example because it was referenced in the Egan report way back when, right, back in 1998. What can we learn from that? And I think, at the time there was this view that, well, construction isn't a manufacturer because everything we build is unique and different. But I think, clearly there's learnings from manufacturing, and offsite and modular and integrated supply chains that speak to the kinds of questions that are being asked here. I'm kind of interested generally in terms of, is the view of the group here now that, okay, construction and AECO and infrastructure can begin to act like a manufacturer? Do you think that's a possibility? And what challenges do we have when we start to think about that? Has anybody got a view on that one?
Of course, you're definitely going to have a view on that one.
Yeah, I think that if you look at other industries, we standardize interfaces, and we have standard products and libraries of things that we can pick from. So the car industry, they look at how one pump and one can be replaced for something else, and so the MEP sector of our industry has some ability to do that. But I think we don't actually standardize and productize the rest of what we build in a building. We have concrete floor slabs and steel frames and things, and they offer so much variability, which is great. But if we really want to standardize and get the benefits of offsite, you do have to look at, how do I productize this? How do I understand all my interfaces and actually make them standard details, so that when a designer comes to the table, they have access to all of that information to then start driving the design, rather than agreeing on a layout initially and then trying to force fit things into it afterwards. And I think there is a recognition that we need to create enough volume in the industry to do that. So designing, for example, a scheme with 3 bridges on it, you haven't got enough investment pipeline, therefore, to justify doing something different. So as long as we continue to procure based on geographic locations, we completely restrict the ability to have a manufacturing approach. If we start to procure based on asset-based types, so we buy 100 bridges as a time rather than the 3, then suddenly the industry, the supply chain has the ability to invest and in the manufacturing that then can be distributed. The upfront capex investment can be distributed across multiple assets rather than just the 3 you're delivering on that project.
Okay, thanks. I think that's managed. That was a really interesting fill there for 10 minutes. Thanks for everybody that contributed.